Okay guys, so here we are for part two, to replace this, finish off the replacement of this nasty bearing. I hope the first part wasn't too painful. I hope the instructions and all the photos I took were informative. And again, this is for my Pajero in particular, which is a 2009 NT long wheelbase 3.2 litre diesel. Hopefully, if you don't have this exact vehicle, this video will actually help you out, at least give you the basics, knowledge of what you have to do for other similar four-wheel drives or even cars. Alright, so let's get started. Okay guys, this is where we left off. So we've got the rear park brake assembly all cleaned up and ready. Now, where those four holes were, obviously where the bearing was bolted in, pop those four bolts in from the rear. Grab the new bearing. Now, before you actually put the bearing in, make sure you just grease the inside of that park brake assembly where you're going to push the bearing through itself, and then also grease around the bearing as well. That'll just make it a little bit easier to slide in. So what you've got to do now is basically push the bearing in. It should go in relatively smoothly. If it doesn't, just grab your rubber mallet, give it a bit of a tap and push it in. You might need to adjust it just to line up the bolts with the screw holes. And then basically just grab your ratchet, give them a bit of a tighten from the rear. Make sure don't tighten one fully. Tighten a little bit from each one and just work your way around. Bottom left, top right, bottom right, top left, and just keep slowly tightening until you get all the four bolts tightened up. And then finally use your breaker bar to give it that last little push. Okay, so now we're going to pop that bracket back in that was screwed to the back of the brake assembly. It's only two little nuts. Pop them in and tighten them up. Then the lower arm of the brake assembly, pull the nut out from the top of the ball joint. Now you're going to basically pull the whole brake assembly forward. Before you pop the axle back in place, grease the spines up, line it up. It'll quite easily slide in and pop back into the actual new bearing, and will pop pretty much back out the front. It's quite an easy process, and yeah, you're on the home stretch. Okay, so the next step is now to pop the ball joint back in place, pop the lower arm back in, and pop the nuts in, line everything up, tighten everything up. It's pretty straightforward. Make sure you use the breaker bar to give it that real good tight. Now with the lower arm, that can present a bit of complexity. Basically just use the bottle jack, use the screwdriver, use your little hammer to give it a bit of a tap and work it all in place. And then actually you'll be able to tap the bolt in ever so slightly, and then tighten that up also. Okay, so now we're going to place the main axle nut back in. It'll go in very smoothly. Tighten her up. Now with this, you're going to need to tighten this up to between 200 and 240 Newton meters force. Now, I don't have a torque wrench, so I just went basically as hard as I could with the 3/4 inch breaker bar with an extended handle. Obviously, if I had a torque wrench, I would use that, but that was my best solution at the time. Okay, so now the fun part, putting this bloody handbrake together, was a very fiddly process. So I ended up grabbing my daughter to help me try and put it back together. It was pretty much a two-man job. I ended up breaking the park brake assembly into the two halves. I removed one of the springs. I put the left half on first. That seemed to be the easiest way to do it. Just made careful note of basically the way things were pulled apart and how I actually had to put them back in place. Again, this was very tedious. Pop the right hand side, then pop the tensioning springs on and all the relevant little bits and pieces. And it was extremely difficult. I won't lie. Pop the clips back in, the adjuster at the bottom, and it was an extremely painful process and took quite a bit of time, and I ended up being extremely frustrated at the end of it. But we got it in. Okay, so now that was done, we put the ABS sensor back in. That was straightforward. Just slid it in, did up the screw, very straightforward and simple. Then we got the disc brake, slid that back on. Again, made sure that the handbrake was disengaged. That went straight on. Very, very simple, nice and easy. Caliper, slid the caliper back on, put the 2 bolts in, pop the cap on, put the pin back in, bent that back in place, checked everything, make sure all the bolts were all tightened up nice and firm, and just really, really big once over. Obviously you don't want your wheel falling off. Got the cap, put a little bit of grease in it to seal up that hole, slid the hubcap back on, dropped the tyre on, all the nuts, tightened it all up, and popped the jack down, and said thank you my daughter for helping me out with that last little bit. Again, I try and involve my daughter and all my kids in a lot of the things I do, trying to pass on the knowledge. I mean, that's what we're there for as parents. So all in all, it was took about, I think, 3 hours, and that was including filming and all these photos. So probably got it done in probably 2 hours, I dare say. So I hope this is going to be a help to you guys. I'm planning on doing a lot more of these videos as more and more problems occur with my four-wheel drive. It's well above 200,000 Ks now, so I've had a few bits and pieces start popping up. But as I come across everything, I'll keep you updated. So I hope you liked the content. If you did, hit the like button. Also, if you're a fan and you want to see more of this sort of stuff, make sure you hit the subscribe button. Leave your comments below. I hope it was helpful for yourself. Again, I'm only learning. I'm not the best at this sort of stuff. I'm more a woodworker than anything, but happy to give anything a go. Look forward to hearing your feedback. Thanks, guys. Until next time.